It's a new year here at the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, and with it comes a bold new direction.
After consultation with our listeners,
And crucially, our non-listeners,
we have pledged this year to make the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy a banter-free zone.
no more of the time-wasting waffle that serves only to pad out the running time and make us appear as human beings with lives external to the podcast.
The very thought sickens me.
As it should. To give you an example of this new policy in action, Dr. Dentith, how's your week been?
That is irrelevant to the present discussion.
Indeed.
We're sure you'll find the new Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy a lean, efficient information dissemination engine.
We'd say we hope you enjoy it, but our desires are of no consequence.
The theme will play now.
Oh, and we have a new theme. The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, brought to you today by Josh Addison and M. Dentith. Hello and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy in 2025, a year that should not exist.
That's the year the Great Doom came upon us all.
It's just too high of a year. I don't approve. But anyway, it is what the year is, and we are recording in that year. Technically, if you're one of our patrons, you'll know that we've actually recorded a couple of episodes already this year, but the quality was not spectacular, and we've sort of saved them to be little filler episodes as and when we need them. So this is our first proper episode.
Although we actually can't guarantee the quality is going to be particularly better for this episode, because the best laid plans of mice and men came awry with the discovery that neither of our laptops actually supports an audio in via a headphone jack. And so our plan to use fancy mics to record this episode has somewhat come awry with the fact that we have really bad laptops.
And of course, I should point out that the reason why we're having to do various sorts of technological jiggery-pokery is because it is in the country currently, and we are recording in person, staring deeply at one another right now.
Some would say into the soul, others would say with daggers in their eyes. Actually, what a wonderful reality TV show. Not stars in their eyes, daggers in their eyes. Matthew, today I'm going to do a really bad impersonation of Stevie Wonder. Oh, yes, they've got daggers in their eyes. The audience, they've got daggers in their eyes.
Anyway? So it is a new year. Em and I are in the same room. That's why the recording quality might not be great, which seems wrong, but
it is counterintuitive to think that when we're actually in the same room, our miking is going to be worse than when we're in completely different countries and different time zones.
But anyway, so there you go. That's just laying the ground rules, letting you know exactly what is up, and also letting you know why it is a week into February before you're getting your first proper episodes. Again, we did record some other ones. They're just, if you're not a patron, you haven't heard them yet. But
yes, they're in the can, which means you'll only hear them if something goes awry.
And
they are emergency episodes broadcast, put out into the ether web, that you know that something has gone very, very bad.
And if we continue as we have started, things probably will go awry. So you'll get to hear them eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
So it's our first proper episode, and now I think, I'm pretty sure in our wrap-up episode at the end of last year, I said one thing I should do is go and listen to more of Em's old radio episodes so I can do another What Does Em Remember episode, given that we've only actually done one and it was meant to be a new segment, a new themed episode. And so I've done that. I have literally done that thing that I said I probably would do.
And now I'm aware that the last time we did this particular segment, there were chuckles and guffaws where Josh had got me fingering things or pointing my finger at things or touching things in such a way that did, out of context, sound suggestive. Now, I'm sure that Josh has done nothing similar this time, and he's gone hard-hitting, journalistic, diving into the details, finding a really interesting topic, or from looks of it, three, and asking me what I remember about those things, and not using it as a cheap setup to a punchline.
Obviously, I would never do such a thing, nor have I ever.
I mean, so the latter part of that sentence is a lie, which makes me think the first half of that sentence is a lie as well, because it's a conjunction. And if A and B, if the conjunct B is false, A is false by implication as well. Quod orat demonstratum, ips custode custiodes.
I think a philosophy podcast is no place for propositional logic. Instead, can you sing? Don't we?
We do, yeah.
Yeah, play it, and we'll do it.
Oi, have you heard? That's conspiracy corner.
Files. At the risk of your own sanity, keep listening.
Right. Let's do it.
All right, I am ready to not laugh at anything I've said in the past at all.
Right, so as you did notice from the fact that I've given you a bunch of clips labelled Episode 1, Episode 2, and Episode 3, I am drawing on 3 of your episodes. Actually, sorry, I should, given that we've only done this once before, I should maybe do a proper introduction again. What this show is about is back in the mists of time.
Segment, not show. Unless we're pivoting the entire podcast to things I've done in the past, you want to embarrass me.
This particular one.
Okay, this episode.
So back in the mists of time, before we were doing this podcast, Em had a radio segment on BFM, the student radio station at Auckland University, and we basically did this sort of thing over about 15-minute segment.
And some would say more efficiently.
Well, you could say that indeed. So given that the earliest of these date back to 2009, we thought it might be an interesting thing if I go, because Em probably has some memory of doing all of these.
I mean, you say some memory, but actually the chances are none.
Well, that's what we're here to find out. I haven't listened to every segment you ever recorded, so what I've done is gone to Em's website, that URL
is mrxdentith.com.
There we go. Where there is an archive
of nearly every episode. There are 5 which I was never able to capture the recordings of, and unfortunately the server that they used to sit upon from whence they could be streamed no longer exists.
Yeah. Oh, so almost all of them are there. So what I've done is I've gone through and listened to some episodes, and now I'm going to quiz Em on exactly how much they remember of these episodes. So the segment is called Does Em Remember? I guarantee you remember the topic of these episodes, because all 3 of them are about the same topic.
Oh dear. So if I don't remember the first, I'm really, really screwed with the second episode.
Can you think of a topic you would have talked about on your conspiracy radio show that you would have bothered going into 3 times over the course of a couple of years?
Well, I mean, because there were basically 2 eras of the show, the Dentith Files and Conspiracy Corner, I can imagine I may have done North Head on one and the other. So I imagine that could be something I could have looked at least twice. Or if you're going for something which is thematic, we could be dealing with American presidency, so something about a recurrent feature of the Obama regime.
Same topic 3 times.
3 times.
I think it's the only thing you talked about in 3 different episodes.
Wow, I'm drawing a blank here.
Yeah. It is none other than Mr. David Icke.
Oh.
So
who we've discussed on this podcast
way more than 3 times.
So obviously, David Icke, if we're going to do the mode of things that I've talked about conspiracy theory-wise in an audio medium, David Icke is the most commonly recurrent figure in my media career.
100%.
Interesting.
Now, so I basically first looked at it.
And actually, so no, why? Because of course I went to 2 of the talks during the tenure of the David Icke. No, that's not the way. I went to 2 David Icke talks during the tenure of doing both Conspiracy Corner and Dentith Files.
I only saw 1, but anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But yes, three episodes on David Icke, because of course, because why not? There's always something you're going to have to say about David Icke.
There's always something there to remind you.
So I was looking through the list, and so there's 3 David Icke episodes. Well, we could make a segment out of that. Maybe will it just retread the stuff that we've talked about on this podcast a million times? And as I listened to them, I was interested to see that there are given that you're talking about some of this 14 years ago, you talking about David Icke 14 years ago is actually kind of different to us talking about David Icke today, because
So, sorry, this is going to turn out that I was a really big David Icke booster 14 years ago and become more cynical about him with time.
Unfortunately, no. But basically, the things that David Icke was saying that you are reporting on, I think, have changed over time.
David Icke is a remarkably inconsistent figure.
Yeah, well, this may well show that. So, the first episode I looked at was the episode of The Dentith Files dated on or about the 6th of October 2009, which is where you introduced your listeners to David Icke the very first time. Now you're right. Last time we had an episode like we did Does Em Remember? I played you a clip and asked you what happened immediately after that clip, and the fact that I picked things out made it sound strange and made somewhat the fool of you. Now I haven't done that at all. Instead, I would like you to play the first clip, episode 1, clip 1 after, and instead tell me what you said directly before that.
All right, Josh, I am pressing the button.
Episode 1, clip 1, the before bit.
Well, it's large, it's amorphous, it's a lot like a jelly, it's quite gelatinous. You prod it wobbles, sometimes it shifts towards you, sometimes it shifts away. Laws of inertia are not quite stable there, but geographically, it's huge.
Geographically, it's huge, Josh. Yes. Geographically, it's huge.
I think you've always known that. Do you know what directly preceded those words of yours?
David Icke's mind virus is such that geographically it's enormous, it's gelatinous, something of that particular type?
No, actually, this wasn't anything to do with David Icke at all. This was simply you introducing your listeners to the fact that while you had talked about more sort of mundane political conspiracies up until now, and this time you were veering off into different territory. Perhaps if you play the second of those two clips, things will become more clear.
We're veering off towards Wexville, Arizona.
Choice.
Although, of course, actually, technically, some people would say that all the conspiracy theories we talk about are actually in Wexville. And actually, that sounds like I'm saying wax, as in, candle wax, as opposed to Wexville, Arizona.
What's the geographical nature of Wexville?
Well, it's large, it's amorphous, it's a lot like a jelly, it's quite gelatinous. You prod it wobbles, sometimes it shifts towards you, sometimes it...
So I'll note that I seem to sound slightly posher in those recordings.
I don't know, maybe it's just being in a radio environment.
It's true, being in a radio environment does make one feel slightly better about the world. So yes, Wexville, Arizona. I see that my sense of humour has in no way changed. I'm still tripping up over the same words.
So that was you setting the stage for a talk about David Icke, and you basically did everything that we've talked about before. You introduced your listeners to who he is, who he was, the purple jumpsuit, the various talk of things. Now, what I found interesting was in this episode you talk about his accusations of anti-Semitism, and we've said this before, but I remember when I first heard about David Icke, it was very much, and the talk of anti-Semitism was very much along the lines of, David Icke's stuff is all coded anti-Semitism. When he talks about these shape-shifting lizards who run the world, that's coded talk for the Jews who run the world, and that's him being anti-Semitic like that. And the reply to that was always, no, David Icke really does believe in shape-shifting reptiles. And yes, he believes that some of the larger Jewish families are shape-shifting reptiles, but also a bunch of other ones are. And it's not specifically anti-Semitism. But I didn't know at the time, of course, that in his earlier books he had talked explicitly about what is the business about the fact that he thought the Holocaust was funded in part by Jewish families, so that there were... He didn't say Jews were responsible for the Holocaust, but he did say some Jews.
Yes, he said that some Jews enabled the Holocaust to occur, which is in part of the long discussion between the Jews in the Middle East versus the European Jews, and the notion that there's even some kind of rivalry between those two different camps. And so, of course, one of those camps was predating upon the other, which has led to all sorts of weird claims, such as senior clerics in Islam helping Hitler, etc., which aren't just claims exclusive to David Icke, because you might remember that one Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, was actually making very similar claims of that kind only a few years ago when he seemed to be downplaying Hitler's role in the Holocaust.
Yes, no, there's a lot wrong there, but I didn't know about that at the time, and yet you did clearly back in 2000. So if I'd educated myself properly by listening to your broadcast,
And as we know, the only way to
What's in-
educate yourself properly is to listen to things that I am saying all the time, 100% of the time, both past and future.
yeah, because I remember that stuff that we just talked about being news to me when we talked about David Icke much more recently than some of the first times we had talked about it. So it was interesting to hear that coming up much later. Now, you talk as you would about him and everything that he believes. Now, what I found interesting, and it would be interesting to compare this to a clip from a later episode, but if you get the next clip from episode 1 ready, you talk about the other. Who was your co-host at the time?
That would have been Jose Barbosa.
Right. Well, he asks you. So what can we do about this? What does David Icke say we can do about this? And so if you play the next clip, this is you saying what David Icke says we can do about this whole shape-shifting reptilians running the world sort of.
He has actually written a book on how to end the global conspiracy. Most of it is about being autonomous, reporting on things factually, being aware of media bias, listening to sources of authority, which all seem like fairly commonsensical things. But of course, his sources of authority are don't trust officials, don't trust government, don't trust scientists, in fact, don't trust anyone who's a qualified expert because they're part of the global consciousness, which is Luciferian consciousness. So he wants independent people like us in our non-reptilian garb to challenge authority at every step. And that's the only way we can actually break free.
Non-reptilian garb.
But so I found that interesting because that seemed quite sort of prosaic compared to, and we'll see this in a minute, but these days when he talks about what you can do about it, it's a lot more sort of lightness and love and just spreading the good vibes, man. Whereas that was interesting to hear you talking about him in 2009, and it seems to be a lot more be informed, don't trust authority style of things.
I mean, the thing we have to remember about David Icke is that he was a journalist, albeit a sports journalist, but still a journalist trained by the BBC. And in 2009, David Icke has kind of gone through the height of one part of his popularity. And it's actually a long way off from the kind of popularity he's going to gain during the COVID-19 initial stages of the pandemic. So in 2009, he's a character who was known for having weird views about alien shape-shifting reptiles, but there's no particular focus on cancelling his talks overseas or telling people that he's a bad man. He's simply someone who goes around, he gives talks. Sometimes he talks about crystal healing, sometimes he talks about alien shape-shifting reptiles. And so there's not much pressure on David Icke to change his messaging. And so I think in this stage of his career, he's going, well, look, if I just give people what I take to be the facts and they think through things critically, they'll change their minds. As there's more media focus on what David Icke is saying and a renewed interest in the kind of crypto anti-Semitism he engages in, I think he then realizes that he can't just do the based upon the facts because the facts are being disputed. People are saying he's not being factual at all. And then he goes down the much more quasi-mystical route of positivity. Admittedly, he's not a particularly positive person because he's always talking about groups of people that we should fear as being alien shape-shifting reptiles. But otherwise, we should love all human beings, apart from those alien shape-shifting reptiles who may or may not be Jewish.
So just keep that clip in mind. We'll be referring back to it later. But so that was
Sorry, this sounds like a legal deposition. Okay, so keeping that clip in mind, we'll be coming back to that in a minute when I show that you've been completely inconsistent to your answers, Professor Dentith.
There's a bit of that as well, but is that just wind?
It is just the wind.
Curious bit of wind. So that's kind of that's it for the first episode. It was an introduction to David Icke, and contained pretty much everything you would expect from an episode introducing people to David Icke. Now,
including gelatinous borders and non-reptilian garb.
Yep. So that was it for the Dentith Files. But you touched on David Icke twice more in the Conspiracy Corner. So if we move ahead a couple of years now to April 2011.
That'll be the Zach and Ethan years, I think.
Yep. So another episode about David Icke, but a particular aspect of David Icke's views, which are possibly summed up in the first clip that I've chosen. So if you can play now, this time I have a clip, a before and after clip, rather than ask you to say what came after or what came before. In this one, crucial bits of the clip are censored out. I'd like you to tell me what's missing from the clip that you're about to play, episode 2, clip 1, before.
George Bush was fingered. Actually, all of the executive branch of the American government under Bush was fingered. And Donald Rumsfeld
did it again. Did it again. Well, it's not my fault. If you keep saying it, I'll keep getting you on it.
So I have to listen to the clip again because you got me with the finger thing. I just completely lost it at that point. So let me just play that again and see if I can treat it seriously with the due seriousness that seriousness requires.
George Bush was fingered. Actually, all of the executive branch of the American government under Bush was fingered. And Donald Rumsfeld.
So I want to say fingered by David Icke, but it's almost as if there's not enough space in that last bit to... Or I could by Icke.
If I can give you a clue, it's not fingered by, it's fingered as.
Alien shape-shifting reptiles.
Alien shape-shifting reptiles.
But I'm assuming it's in reptilians?
Reptilians.
Yeah, reptilians. Yeah, okay, all right.
So this episode was the Reptilians episode. This is where you specifically talk about not David Icke in general, but David Icke and his belief that there are these shape-shifting reptiloids secretly running the show. Now, you started up right near the beginning by noting the connection to, or the similarity to V, and pointing out that the V miniseries came out a little bit before David Icke started.
Actually, I just want to interject here. They're making a new V miniseries, but it's an audio drama made by Big Finish, the people who do all the Doctor Who audio dramas, and increasingly every audio drama in the world, because Big Finish keep buying up the rights to dead shows and making audio dramas. Apparently they record a new audio drama every day, or at least 5 days a week. So yes, they're making a V mini-series set in the UK this time. David Icke will be very happy.
I never watched the new mini-series, but I gather it got cancelled after one season and didn't resolve anything.
I think it actually got cancelled midway through season 1, so they didn't even get a season 1 cliffhanger resolution.
Yeah, but yeah. So you talked about that and gave the analogy. I don't think you brought up the Stargate analogy, but you mentioned the X-Files as being something that people talk about. Oh, it's the show exists to make people not believe. You know, when they encounter the stuff for real, they'll think, oh, it's just that TV show. You're getting confused or whatever. Bringing up the term predictive programming as being something that Alex Jones used to say a lot. Did he originate the term, or was it something?
No, I think it well predates him. I think even Bill Cooper was talking about it back in the day.
Yes, so you talk about V and the idea that you know, the idea that David Icke was ripping off V a little bit, and then the response to that from his supporters saying, well, no, it's predictive programming. They put that there so that when someone like Icke comes along telling the truth about the reptiloids, people will say, oh, he's just ripping that off from having watched V. Now, the reason why you were talking about that at that particular time, I don't suppose you can remember what could have prompted you to have been talking about reptilians in 2011?
Is it going to be the John Key vet thing?
No.
Oh. Because John Key did have that. Yeah. So for listeners who don't know anything about New Zealand politics, which will be a goodly proportion of the listeners, someone actually did send in an official information access request to the New Zealand government asking, and this was a person who doesn't believe in the alien shape-shifting reptile hypothesis, they were just pulling a prank. Could John Key prove he wasn't a member of an alien shape-shifting race? Yeah. And so John Key gave a press conference where he said he'd been to a vet and the vet had assured him that he's not a lizard, something which I actually think might have been a case of the Prime Minister lying to the people of New Zealand, and that I think John Key took this as a joke and made a joking answer, which means he actually may not have fulfilled the requirements of the official information access request. But of course, it may be the case that John Key literally did go to a vet to prove. But it just seems like one of those things. I can't see John Key actually going to a vet and saying, "Am I a lizard or not?" So I was wondering whether that was
It could
the.
have been, but it was not in this
Oh,
case. But I think we can all agree that lying about having gone to the vet is definitely the worst thing John Key ever did in his term as Prime Minister. So
yes, apart from the pulling of people's hair and all the other things he did which were bad. Yeah.
Anyway, no, so it was the same thing. You're on the right line. It was there was an interview at the time of Donald Rumsfeld. It was an American radio show. They had Louis C.K., a guy who went on to, I assume, do lots of good things and be a perfectly wonderful person post 2011.
No, I mean, he just disappeared. Just disappeared.
No one ever heard from him again.
Yeah.
That's what happened to Louis C.K. directly after this interview, probably.
Yeah. They definitely didn't win a Grammy recently, thus upsetting the entire world by giving someone an award who turns out to be a terrible human being who's never really apologized for things he did.
Anyway, in 2011, when everybody thought Louis C.K. was just dandy, he was a guest on a radio segment where it was a bit of a weird sort of a snafu where Donald Rumsfeld called into the show. I think it was like a mistake or something. He thought they wanted an interview, but they weren't expecting him. But at any rate, he called into the show, and they were talking to him about stuff. And one of the things they said was, what do you say to people who there are people out there who think you're actually a secret lizard. You're like a lizard person. What do you say to that? And he didn't deny it. Was the thing. I won't. You play the whole clip in that episode, but I'm not going to have a clip of the clip because it's actually quite a long segment. Because the point was, they ask him, "Are you a lizard?" And he doesn't actually say, "Oh, no, of course I'm not a shapeshifting lizard." What silly things people believe. He just goes off into some weird tangent about talking to someone who came up to him at a restaurant and had a chat with him and talked about stuff, and gives just this sort of generic, very much a politician response of pointless waffle that doesn't actually mean anything and doesn't answer the question at all. So throughout the rest of that interview, Louis C.K. is in the background shouting out, "Are you a lizard? Are you a lizard, Donald?" and constantly challenging Donald Rumsfeld to deny on radio that he is in fact a shape-shifting lizard, and he never denied it.
Well, I think that's just case closed on Donald Rumsfeld, lizard person, which of course is the worst thing he could possibly be, and not any of the other things he did.
Exactly. Now, so that was interesting and a bit of fun. But what interested me about this episode, again on the theme of Icke's changing beliefs, maybe, I'm not sure. During this episode, when you're talking to your co-hosts about David Icke and what he believes about reptiloids and so on, you actually say in this episode that it isn't clear that Icke actually believes this literally, that it could just be a metaphor for how these people who run the world, the people in power, they're just not like us. They're just a different kind of person. And so at the time, in 2011, you were saying it isn't 100% certain whether or not he really believes this literally. Do you think that's still the case?
I think subsequently the fact that he has denied the figurative nature or figurative interpretation of his work indicates that he at least claims to now sincerely believe in the existence of alien shape-shifting reptiles. I think it's possible to look at his earlier work and go, it could be metaphorical. But I think now he would absolutely staunchly deny a metaphorical reading of his work. And maybe that's also true of his past work. Maybe I was simply trying to be too charitable to David Icke back in 2011.
Yes, and but it is interesting on that. If it were to be just metaphor, like I was just saying, that these politicians and stuff, they're not like us. The Don Rumsfeld clip does kind of support that because he's asked a blunt, non-ambiguous question that could very easily be laughed off, and yet instead of responding like a human being, he responds like a politician with a long, waffling speech about nothing that addresses nothing and doesn't really tell you a thing about it. So,
And yet, that seems to be how we've trained politicians to respond to any question now.
Well, yes, that's the thing. It's so full of gotchas, and the penalty for changing one's mind.
Although I don't think you can really change your mind about alien shape-shifting reptile and your sense of identity.
Yeah, no, not on that particular issue. But yeah, so that was interesting. Just to see how talking about Icke's views, if not Icke's views, has changed in the intervening, Jesus Christ, 14 years. What the hell is going on with the passage of time? I don't support it.
Yeah, there's some kind of weird expansion thing. I don't understand how it works, but it's affecting us all.
Now, I think in that episode, although I didn't make a note of this, but I'm pretty sure, is your building secretly a kettle?
Yes, that's why we're boiling away. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I think in this episode, which was April of 2011, you did mention David Icke's show. I think you mentioned that he was coming to the country back then, which of course would be foreshadowing for the third, and as far as I'm aware, final time you talked about David Icke on Conspiracy Corner, which is in August of...
So was it meant to be a clip 2 for... Oh no, we actually did. We never played the after.
Oh, you never played the... That's because you guessed it correctly.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to play it just quickly now, just so...
just
to see if you actually got it right.
Yeah.
Yes.
George Bush was fingered as one of these reptiles. Actually, all of the executive branch of the American government under Bush was fingered as reptiles. And Donald Rumsfeld.
Now, on one level, I feel like that was the right thing to do. On another level, actually, that really was not necessary. Because you're right, I did guess. So, frankly, we just wasted 15 seconds of not just our time, but that of our listeners.
I'm sure.
How does that make you feel, Josh? How does it make you feel to have wasted 15 seconds of their time and then me wasting another 30 seconds talking about how we've wasted that 15 seconds, actually getting close to 45 seconds of wasted time now?
I feel literally nothing.
Good.
So, yes, this brings us to the third episode, August of 2011, which was your report having gone to David Icke's, your first experience of the David Icke experience.
Do I talk about spraining my ankle?
I think you mentioned having sprained your ankle, and then the next time you went was after I just gave you a head cold, wasn't it?
Yes, and I almost felt like I was going to die. Yeah, every time I've seen David Icke, there has been a significant impediment to my lifestyle. So the day before I was due to go see David Icke, I sprained my ankle, my right ankle, the ankle I've sprained 4 times now, just walking down the road. And it actually completely derailed my trying to get out to where's Rainbow's End is located in which part of Auckland? Manukau City. Derailed my trip out to Manukau City because I was going to catch public transport out there, but my foot was so immobile, the thought of actually walking to the bus stop filled me with dread. So I had to catch a taxi from Ponsonby out to Manukau City, and then spent the entire day. And David Icke talks along, it's 8 hours in length. Spent the entire day trying to shift around and find a way to not being in excruciating pain.
So that aside, you did come back with a report on everything he talked about. So it's interesting what he talked about back in 2011. Apparently, he was already on about hollow moons and Saturn/Satan.
Oh, yes, and sending the signal to the hollow moon to bounce it back to Earth to create the hologrammatic prison planet in which we live.
And so you talked about all the things. Basically, did it differ markedly from the next time you went?
Yes, actually. There was a lot less moon stuff the second time.
Right.
There was, in many respects, the first third to half of a David Icke talk is always going to be pretty similar because he doesn't launch into any of the weird stuff until about hour 3 or 4. The first 2 or 3 hours essentially is world history and how politics is really, really bad. And we can show this by the fact that successive governments have done very bad things over the last 200 to 300 years, which shows that the political class are a malign influence on society. And only once he said, look, all governments are bad, does he start going, and here's the root cause. And so he goes into religion, and then from religion, he goes on to, isn't it interesting? There are these common symbols between all the supposedly unrelated world religions. That suggests that there's some common cause there. Thus, you get the aliens, the iconic mind viruses, and all that stuff. And it's that latter stuff, which is the stuff that changes, often due to whatever film he's recently watched.
Yes, yeah, it was quite clear when he saw The Matrix, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, and then very clear when he saw The Hunger Games.
But no, so you talk about a bunch of... Now, one thing that interested me, simply because I don't remember it coming up before, is apparently at that point he mentioned the fact that we have a structure of our brain that's referred to as the lizard brain. And
Oh, yeah, he's really fixated on the fact we have a lizard brain or hind brain.
I don't remember that coming up when we've talked about him before. But yes, making the fact that we have a lizard brain showing that there's this reptilian DNA has been seeded within humanity.
It's because David Icke doesn't understand the lizard brain or hind brain. It's just going, well, look, there's a primitive part of the brain, which isn't part of the sophisticated human experience. It's part of a more primitive animal experience. How primitive does it go? Well, just like a lizard.
Yeah. Now, I said in the first episode, we had that clip of what does David Icke say we can do about the state of the world that it's in. And so in this episode, you brought up the same thing again, having talked about everything he said about the state of the world. You then said, and here's what David Icke says we should do about it. So if you play the first clip, let's listen to this and see how it compares to the one that we listened to earlier.
If we all change our view, we're all able to be positive about the world, realize that actually we shouldn't be constrained by five sense experience, that we should actually engage and create a higher vibration, then we will break free of the system of control and we will find that the world is plentiful and bountiful. There'll be no resource scarcity. There'll be no climate change. It'll all be good, because the only reason why things look bad is because we're told they look bad. If we change our perspective, suddenly things will get better.
That's quite the different story.
Yes, so he's gone a lot more hippie, new age. Let's all just be awesome to each other. Had he just seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
I think so. The thing about David Icke's career is that in some parts of the world, he's famous for his advocating new age or spiritualist healing things. So in Canada, he's really big on crystals. That seems to be the big thing he does when he's been to Canada, at least in earlier times. And he's been to various so-called mystic sites around the world and claimed to have had mystical experiences. Actually, a lot like Alex Jones, the latter-day career of David Icke is filled with revelations from higher powers. And I think at this particular point in time, and I think this is still largely true now, he's really focused on the notion of a singular mental gestalt, and the idea if we just think together and we're positive, then that's the way we can take the shackles, the control system away from us. And it is because the Matrix has become such a major part of his view that we think we live in a world which is terrible and bad. But actually it's bountiful and beautiful, Josh. You just need to break through the perception barrier, and you too can understand how wonderful the world is outside, even if it is boiling hot inside.
It is. It was be excellent to each other in Bill and Ted's, wasn't
it? It was, yes.
You know what I mean.
George Carlin,
bless him. So that was mostly it. Again, none of the meat of what you said in any of these episodes are things that we haven't heard before and talked about on this podcast. But it was interesting to see the differences between the change over time and the differences in the way David Icke talked, or the way you talked about how David Icke talked, had changed. But in that third episode in August of 2011, there was a segment in there that when I listened to it, it shocked me to my very core and gave me pause to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about you. Can you play the last clip from episode 3?
I guess I can.
Any New Zealand celebrities?
Not that I noticed.
Pity Weepu down the back.
Colin Mathura.
No, I mean, there may have been a Dan Carter or Richie McCaw somewhere in the background, but it was very dark and venue, and my eyesight in dark is not particularly good.
So
Right. When talked about New Zealand celebrities, you unprompted gave your go-to examples of New Zealand celebrities were Dan Carter and Richie McCaw. Who are Dan Carter and Richie McCaw, Dr. Dentith?
They're rugby players?
They are rugby players. People who play and what is rugby? It's a sport. Without even being asked, simply given the prompt of New Zealand celebrities, you immediately went for not one but two sporting icons. Are you even Dr. Dentith at all? Were you, since that episode aired, replaced by a shape-shifting reptilian? And the dear Dr. Dentith, who we thought we knew, is long dead and mouldering in a pit somewhere. Answer me that question, Dr. Dentith, if that is your real name.
Look, the thing is, I was on a bus one day and a person sitting down next to me, and they were talking about how the economy is working. And I feel that with the current governmental structure and the push through particular policy initiatives and reforms, that the idea is that we're going to have a better society, a more just society, a more prosperous society, one which is economically beneficial to all members of society. So I put it to you that you're asking the wrong question here. You should be focusing on the net benefits of the government's current policies and not engaging in discussions which are just irrelevant to the kind of thing we should be focusing our attention upon.
Well, that's not the sort of thing any human being would say, but it is exactly what a politician would say. So I don't know if that's better or worse.
Well, I put it to you that it's the economic policy which is in the end tantamount and important.
I can't really argue with that. So, does M remember? You kind of did. Well, I mean, you can't not remember David Icke, I suppose.
No.
But what did you find it interesting listening to your youthful, hopeful, optimistic voice and what it had to say about David Icke all those years ago?
So, I mean, the common complaint everybody has, whether they're a public speaker or a broadcaster, is you actually never like listening back to your own work because all you do is you focus on, why did I say it that way? Why did I not say it this way? And so it is interesting hearing the clips and going, oh yeah, still talk the same way, maybe not as fancy as I did in the past, still stammer and stutter on particular keywords. But in the end, I feel that I had a grasp on David Icke then, and I have a grasp on David Icke now.
Would you say your grasp has evolved over time, or simply because David Icke has evolved over time?
Yeah, I think because David Icke is a moving target, my appreciation, if that is the right word to use, of David Icke has shifted with the man himself.
Well, that makes perfect sense, and I think it's a perfect thing to go out upon. So, that's the end of an episode, our first proper, real, honest-to-goodness episode for 2025. Now, I guess we should say now, obviously, we are in the same place. I have not gone to Zhuhai, China. Em has indeed come back to Auckland, New Zealand, but not for very long.
No. So next week, I'm off down to the Waikato, where I'm taking part in a workshop on conspiracy theories being organised by Joe Ulatowski from the philosophy program at the University of Waikato. And then next Sunday, boarding a plane, flying back to China, start teaching a week from then.
Right, and so at that stage, our regular recording setup will resume, and presumably our regular recording schedule.
Indeed. Although it won't be Thursdays because I'm teaching on Thursday nights. So I have to find a different day of the week.
Because one of my boys has an extracurricular activity on Thursday nights as well. So we can pick a night. It'll all work out.
Yeah,
sure.
there are ways around it. The calendar is flexible.
Because it's made of cardboard a lot of the time.
Well, actually, these days, just bits and bytes.
That's true also. So we will, of course, be recording a patron a bonus episode for our patrons immediately.
We will be
after
largely just
this.
despairing about what's going on in America.
So much has been going on in America.
To the point where it's actually almost impossible to work out what to talk about because there is so much to talk about.
And in the time between us recording this episode, editing it and getting it up online, there will probably have been more that we never even got the chance to talk about. But that's not a problem for right now. That's a problem for in a couple of minutes when we stop recording and start recording again. Right now, the problem is that I always finish episodes just by saying goodbye. I feel like I need a new catchphrase. So I guess I'm just going to have to workshop some more. So maybe for this episode, I will just close things out by saying, get off my lawn, you punk kids.
I'm going to say, Josh, get defenestrated.
Good work. Good work. The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy features Josh Addison and Associate Professor M.R.X. Dentith. Our producers are a mysterious cabal of conspirators known as Tom, Philip, and another who is so mysterious that they remain anonymous. You can contact us electronically via podcastconspiracy@gmail.com or join our Patreon and get access to our Discord server. Or don't, I'm not your mum. And remember, it's not the fall that kills you. This time...